net. The Republican position heading into the debt ceiling showdown is quite different. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. So this is also the New York Times. They say House GOP prepares to slash federal programs in coming budget showdown. With Social Security and Medicare off the table, conservatives are focusing on a wide range of smaller programs as a clash with Biden and Democrats looms. So they have taken off the table after initially sort of like some of them were flirting with it, but they have now taken off the table Social Security and Medicare. I think Trump was probably very influential on that, as well as, honestly, Biden in the State of the Union, who, when they all freaked out, oh, of course we don't cut Social Security and Medicare, even though we've been trying to do that for decades and decades and decades, they kind of backed themselves into a corner on that one. So those have been put off the table. And they also don't want to really cut the defense budget other than some like minor line item for a like diversity initiative, which basically amounts to next to nothing in terms of the actual amount of money you would save. So since they put those big pieces on the table, off the table, that means that they have to deeply slash basically everything else. What they are talking about here in this article in particular, they say it includes a 45% cut to foreign aid, adding work requirements for food stamp and Medicaid beneficiaries, 43% cut to housing programs, including phasing out Section 8 altogether, cutting the FBI's counterintelligence budget by nearly half. I think I could probably get behind that piece of it. And eliminating Obamacare expansions to Medicaid to save tens of billions of dollars. Nearly 40 states have accepted that Medicaid expansion under the Affordable Care Act. About 12 million people benefit from that. So what they're proposing here is effectively cutting health care for 12 million Americans, among a lot of other cuts. So that's the position that they found themselves in. And we've been talking about, listen, if you're taking entitlements and defense off the table, like the math doesn't really work out. You basically have to kill the entire rest of the federal budget in order for this to come together with the math that they want.
Right. I think it's important for people to understand that, too, which is like if you really do want to get serious about it and you don't want to cut defense, like there's really no way to do it without impacting a lot of American programs, which are actually broadly popular amongst Republicans. There's a reason that how many states voted for Republicans? A lot more than 4, or a lot less than 10, or a lot more than 10, the 10 that haven't expanded Medicaid. And that's because it's actually very popular, especially in the South, with a lot of governors who have quietly kind of used it for expansion. I would just say that. And it does not necessarily fit within the spirit of don't touch Social Security and Medicare, because Medicaid is also used increasingly also by a lot of Republican voters. So that's one that I would note.
And it's popular, too, by the way.
It's very popular.
Yeah.
I mean, look, healthcare is popular. I don't know why it's exactly difficult for people to get their minds around that. Broadly, in terms of the budget, too, even with the GOP one, it's the same thing. It's a messaging campaign document. It doesn't mean anything. Like, much of this is not going to happen. I increasingly, looking at these two documents, I'm curious what you think. I think we're just going right back to sequestration. There is no, for people who don't know what sequestration is, it basically is off-the-board percentage cuts against, it's like a haircut across the federal government, including with the defense budget. And it's one of the ways that they were able to square it during the Obama years. And it's because there was no agreement on anything. All they could agree to fund the government was basically haircutting all of federal spending. And when you do that, it broadly impacts all programs across the board. So I don't see a way that we get through all of this without just going right back towards that. And by the way, sequestration was very unpopular. People in the military hated it. People in domestic programs hated it. Republicans hated it. Democrats hated it. And that's part of the reason why it was the only compromise.
I don't know. I genuinely don't know how it gets resolved. And the deadline is, I mean, it's this summer, so this is not far away. And the Republican caucus, obviously in the House, they have a very small majority. So it's not just getting agreement with the Democrats who, are disgusted with the idea of taking the country's economy hostage to force any spending cuts through. So that's the big barrier. But even within their own caucus, this is an initial sort of like high level plan. But when you actually get to the nitty gritty and people start realizing like, oh, this is going to hurt this project in my district, this is going to hurt this program in my district, my constituents are going to be furious if they lose their health care and they start blaming me, that becomes very dicey as well. And then you have some hardliners in the Republican caucus who are like, I'm not voting for a debt ceiling increase, period. Period, end of story. I don't care how many, I'm just not doing it, period. So I genuinely do not know how this is going to be resolved. And that's why we're continuing to focus on it, because it's this thing that's sort of hanging out there as a real threat to the economy and major political blow up in the near future. And there is no clear resolution.